Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about The Dragon in Winter, the third book of the Kagan the Damned series by Jonathan Maberry, which I think is Jonathan Maberry. He typically writes horror stuff, but this was his foray into epic fantasy, and what he actually did was give us a really great fusion of epic fantasy with just so much horror in it that it works. But let's get into that in a bit. What is the Dragon in Winter about? So this is actually the third book in the series, the final in the trilogy actually, FYI, and in it, war is the opening flames of war have begun. Kagan at the head of a group of a team, they essentially bring war to the Witch King of Akia, and the other nations that previously were part of the Silver Empire, they begin to weigh the cost of the Witch King, whether they want him as an ally or whether they want to stand against him, and but obviously, like, we know which way it's going to eventually tip. But the real fun of it is how it eventually tips. So yeah, war is on the horizon, but at the same time we have these big mysteries going on in the background, because the Witch King is drawing his magic from somewhere, and that somewhere happens to be where the title of the book comes in. If you've read the previous books, you know pretty much exactly what we're referring to, where this is headed. But I won't really spoil that. And the final thing is that, as much as war is breaking out, it's now become a race against time, because the Witch King is planning a pretty evil piece of magic, and if he is able to pull it off, not only will he become a god among men, but Hastur, the shepherd god of the Hakians, will tread on the earth for the first time in millennia, and humanity cannot hope to stand against him. So, right off the bat, honestly, it's a banger of a finale. Like, these books, they're like, I think the perfect phrase to describe them is epic pulp, because these are not books where there's like this grand characterization or focus on like deep thematic depth or these kind of things. These are action romps in given the epic fantasy treatment, with a liberal splash of horror. Like, there is some dark stuff happening in these books, not just in terms of what it's always the peasants always pay the price, right? Not just in terms of what the common folk experience, but in terms of what the Witch King raises to prepare for war. Aside from that, we have just these other incredible elements of horror to the story that are just spread throughout it. Like I already mentioned what the Witch King raises, but first and foremost for me, the parts of horror that really struck were like, it's just the way that Jonathan Maberry has a way of describing things. Like, he is just incredible, absolutely incredible at describing things and making it seem so horrific and so absolutely insane, like completely beyond the scope of human comprehension. He just has a way of, in the way that he phrases these things, it's honestly, that's the flavoring for the majority of this book, when things get really dark, and it just works. Like, it's almost like the book has heavy Lovecraftian elements. The elder gods are very much referenced in here. A lot of elements from Lovecraftian fiction is directly mentioned in here, like the color out of space, these kind of things. The elder gods, Cthulhu, they're all in here. And a few of the other elder gods do get name dropped. So Lovecraft is a heavy influence on this novel, not just in terms of like the elements of the world, but like I mentioned, in the way that Jonathan Maberry describes things and portrays things, some of the dark things that happen is just incredible. In addition to that, he's a pretty inventive guy on his own. Like, there's some parts of his world building in here that were just fantastical to read about. They were fun. Like he gives dragons the elder god treatment, for FYI. I don't think that's really much of a spoiler because the Dragon in Winter is literally the name of the title, right? Anyway, so there's that spectacular writing. On top of that, in terms of the plotting, like we're talking action from the get-go, and it never quite relents. Along the way, we have some incredible revelations. We have some set pieces that change, that constantly shift and change the direction of the war. Things play out in a direction that we hope they'll play out, but not necessarily in the way that we want them to play out. Like, it's just really well done. The action is off the charts in this one, which is expected. Like the book is all about war essentially, right? In terms of the characterization, like I said, this is not a series where characterization is really like a key selling point, but at the same time there is some amount to it, because we get, like, as the story comes to a close, Kagan kind of, there are some more serious moments where Kagan takes the time to let his friends know how he feels about them, these kind of things, you know. There are multiple Veil sons of the Poison Rose, who are at play in this story, and some of them may not make it through, and because of that, like, their interactions, it's different from what we've seen throughout the two novels so far. So it does pack a bit of a punch in that regard. And then of course there's the remaining seedlings from who we already knew about from the first two books. Like, as they continue to try to deal with the trauma that they're enduring in their own way, like that has its own. There is some stuff here. Like, it's not like everyone is bland and there's no character, no depth to them. It's just that focused character driven story is not the point of these books. Really and truly. What else did I want to talk about them? So there's that. Honestly, it was a great finale. It truly was a great finale. Like, I had fun reading this one from start to finish. One thing I did like about it is that Jonathan Maberry, he set things, like, I like when authors play with your perception of the story. Like, he spent quite a bit of time in the first two books setting things up so that we think we understand what's happening, the direction the story is headed, what are the key goalposts that need to be hit, that kind of thing, before the story can come to a close. But it turns out that some of these things were false from the get-go, and there were some twists left to be unraveled in the end. One of them in particular, it was a pretty big one. I'm still not sure how I feel about that. It kind of feels like a cop-out. Like, it kind of feels like a cop-out on the story, and one that certainly, to an extent, reduces a lot of the emotional impact that the story has. But at the same time, like, as much as this was seemingly a core component of the entire trilogy so far, there were little things here, like in the way that things were depicted. They don't quite seem to mesh, and they were also depicted in such a way that there was quite a lot of room left open to interpretation. So it's very plausible that things could play out the way it is. Whether that works for you or not is up to you as a reader. For me personally, I felt like it was just a little too... it just kind of made the story just a wee bit too binary. Almost as if the stakes, like, given how dark or how horrific this series is, how incredible, how violent and all of that it is, like, it kind of feels like it just reduces the stakes a bit for our main characters, which... for me, that's my personal take. It may not be yours reading it. It might be that the story just works for you flat out. But that's kind of like my one thing with the direction that the story took. But it is what it is. That is the story that was written, and honestly, that's more me nitpicking at this point. It's not like, it didn't really hamper my enjoyment of the book. overall, and it did add like a little splash of, of redemption into the story, which honestly, given how dark and violent and evil a lot of this story is, maybe it did need a little splash of hope, a little splash of, you know, something positive in it to kind of give it like a little bit of how to put it, contrast, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, so that's pretty much what I think of The Dragon in the Winter. Great finale to a great series. Like, by no means is this a series that I think it's you know, it's top 10 or top 20 or anything like that, but it is a really fun series. There's hell a lot worse out there. Jonathan Maberry is a great writer. Hopefully he writes more fantasy in the future. I'll certainly be there for that. And yeah, like if I were to make a list of my top fantasy series, not necessarily top 10, top 50, whatever, but this would certainly be in there. And yeah, fun series. If you're like I mentioned, it does have some Lovecraftian elements, so if depending on your enjoyment of that, take this with a grain of salt. But yeah, that's all I have to say about The Dragon in the Winter. If you're a fan of the series, definitely pick this one up. I don't know why you wouldn't. It's the finale to the trilogy. It's everything we've loved about the series to date. And if you're considering pick up this series, it's certainly worth the read. Like I mentioned, like I keep pretty up to date with most of the Epic Fantasy releases every year, and there are plenty worse releases out there than this. You could do quite a bit worse. Yeah, absolute blast. Well, I personally had an absolute blast, and that's all I have to say about The Dragon in the Winter. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.